Good afternoon. I'm Gary Schoenwolf, and I'm here today in Washington, D.C. at the Experimental Biology 2011 meeting. And it really is my great pleasure today to be chatting with Aaron J. Ladman, known to his friends as John. John, welcome very much to D.C.
Barry, pleasure to be here, be with you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here with you. It really is great because there's been a gap in time to see you again and to spend some time with you at this meeting.
Yeah, when was the last time we saw each other?
I'm not sure, but I bet it's close to 10 years.
Oh, God.
It is a long time ago.
Yeah.
So today, John and I will be discussing his career of almost 60 years as a scientist, educator, editor, and administrator. But more importantly to me, since I've directly benefited from many interactions with him over the years, we will also discuss his role as a mentor. By way of background, John started his undergraduate education at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and then moved to New York University, where he received his bachelor's degree. He then moved back to Ohio briefly, where he attended the University of Cincinnati, and then moved to Indiana University, where he received his PhD. In a move that was very unusual for the time, John was subsequently appointed research fellow in anatomy at Harvard Medical School, where his project was supported through a research fellowship from the American Cancer Society. After completion of his postdoctoral fellowship, John was appointed associate in anatomy at Harvard Medical School and then moved to the University of Tennessee Medical Units in Memphis as an associate professor in anatomy. 3 years later, John moved to the Department of Anatomy, University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, as professor and chairman. It was in Albuquerque that I first met John when I moved to his department as a postdoctoral fellow. After a stint of almost 20 years at Albuquerque, John then became professor of anatomy and dean, School of Allied Health Professions, Hahnemann University in Philadelphia. Currently, John is officially in retirement.
Not necessarily, but go on.
Officially, but maybe not practically. And he's an adjunct professor of neurobiology and anatomy, Drexel University College of Medicine in Philadelphia, where he spends time teaching gross anatomy.
Well, that's not entirely correct, but we'll clear that up a little bit.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
You have to realize that John is an editor. He never stops being an editor. And if he had his red pen, he'd be penning ink all over me in red.
Not necessarily there either.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I'd like to go back over that. That was a very brief
history.
Kind of history.
So why don't you embellish on that?
Because I think it's important to know that I'm a first-generation American. My parents came here from Russia in the early 1900s as immigrants. I'm the youngest of a family of three, the only one who has gone to college and finished. I was a rambunctious, if you will, student in the grades 1 through 12, and at the time in New York City, they had this program of rapid advance. So they rapid advanced this rambunctious person through the grades relatively quickly. And I graduated from high school at the age of 16 and went out to Miami University. At the time that I graduated, Pearl Harbor occurred. And I came back to New York after a year and a half at Miami to finish up at NYU in Washington Square in Manhattan. I was in a program then of being a pre-dental student and got a deferment for 6 months because they needed medical people for the war. As soon as the Second Front was anticipated, what they did basically was to cancel all deferments, and I was drafted back into the service. I came into the service in January of 44. We went over into Europe. I wasn't with the invasion at Normandy, but we did eventually get to France on New Year's Eve of 44, 45. And at the end of the war, on May the 2nd of 45, I was chasing Germans with our unit, the 286th Engineer Combat Battalion, of which I was a dental technician with a dentist there, in the city of I'm blocking on it right now. Hang on. Kufstein, Austria. And that's just over the border and down the road a piece from Garmisch-Partenkirchen, the ski place of Austria. We came back at the end of the war to remobilize, and in July of 45, we were in southern France. And on August the 2nd, we had our orders to embark on troop ships bound for Okinawa. And they were put on hold suddenly. And on August the 6th, when the atomic bomb was dropped, all orders were changed. And as a result, we went back to Germany for 9 months of occupation duty and then returned to the United States for discharge. I always thank Harry Truman for saving my life, because if he hadn't said yes to bombing Japan, not only would I have died in the invasion, they expected 500,000 Americans would die in the invasion of Japan, and they had expected 1 million to invade it. And it would have saved more Japanese lives than were lost due to the atomic explosions. Then the thing that I finished my degree at NYU, Washington Square College in New York, in 47. And as a result of my excellent studies, I guess you would call it, I had a good relationship with the chairman of the biology department, Harry Charapa, who had a friend up in the Jackson Laboratory who was looking for a research assistant. And he suggested that I go and apply for this position, which I did and I got. The individual was Meredith Runner, an embryologist.
I know Meredith, yes.
And I was his first research assistant in the Jackson Lab in the summer of 47. That lasted for about 3 months of active work. And then the October 47 fire destroyed the laboratory on Mount Desert Island in Bar Harbor, Maine. We moved to the Hamilton Station, which is another part of the laboratory that specialized in larger animals, rabbit breeding, etc. And we did some work there. In the meantime, Paul Salwin, who was the rabbit geneticist working there at the time, had a friend in Cincinnati, and this friend was Joe Schwinn, the chairman of anatomy at that time, and he suggested that there may be a place for graduate study there. I was interested in immune cells and other things, and we corresponded, and he offered me a position as a graduate student. I was on the GI Bill so that he didn't have to come up with funds for a fellowship. So we were arranged to go to Cincinnati in the fall of 47, 48. In the meeting of the anatomists, which was held in Montreal of that year, Joe Schwinn had a heart attack and died. The next in line at Cincinnati, his name was Lawrence O. Morgan, who was a neuroanatomist of classic design, agreed to take me on, fulfill the commitment of Dr. Schwinn. And he, unbeknownst to me at the time, was engaged in conversations with Indiana University And to make a long story short, he left Cincinnati and went to Indiana and asked if I would like to go with him. He was a neuroanatomist focusing on the hypothalamus. I had become interested through my work with Dr. Runner in reproductive medicine on the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And during the next year, we both moved to Indiana, and I picked up my studies there. Dr. Morgan went into the hospital for a routine hemorrhoidectomy, which nowadays is done in the office as an outpatient procedure, and he dies on the operating table. So here I am without a mentor, and I fortunately got to know the chairman of the biology department at Indiana in Bloomington, and he and Meredith Runner happened to be friends, and Meredith was a graduate, got his PhD at Indiana. So we had an arrangement where I could do the animal work in the summertime at the Jackson Laboratory and do the histology and other work, academic work, at Indiana during the school year. And it was this arrangement, which was the first of its kind to have been worked out between the laboratory and an academic institution, that featured the background of some of the differences of my development in terms of what people would do normally in a postgraduate operation. To be continued.
Okay.
Let me take it one step
that
further.
embellished 2 sentences of mine.
Let me take it one step further. In the meeting of 1952, the anatomists met at Brown University. I had communicated with Dr. Wislocki, who was the chairman of anatomy at Harvard, because he was doing some very interesting work, and was one of the leaders in histochemistry, which was just coming of age, and the Histochemical Society was just being formed, of which he was the first president. And I asked him if I could become a postdoc in his department, gave him a list of the problems that I would like to work on, and under his aegis. He came to the meeting from Boston down to Brown University in Providence, and I met with him at the anatomist meetings. We seemed to get along very well together, and he suggested that I apply for this American Cancer Society fellowship, which I did, and with his approval we got it, and that's how I got to Harvard. Mm-hmm. And to make that story just a little bit longer, Dr. Wislocki, this was in August of '52, came down with cancer, and he died in October of '56.
Boy, it's dangerous to say people are going to mentor you.
That's the rationale behind this long disquisition, if you will. Yeah. Anyway, at that time at Harvard, Don Fawcett was there, Helen Dean, Elizabeth LeDuc, my friend Russ Barnett, with whom I did a number of studies. All were active in histochemistry. And the electron microscope had been introduced into that department. And of course, Don Fawcett was a master microscopist as well as an artist in the darkroom. And it was just a pleasure to be in that very stimulating environment where there are so many individuals who have the ability and the background as well as the personal experience to assist you if you got into a jam. Their doors were always open, and you could always ask them a question or two or get some advice. All right, let's go on.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously that experience heavily impacted you because the department you set up in Albuquerque had wonderful electron microscopy facilities, and virtually every faculty member in the department was doing some form of electron microscopy or another, including myself when I came as a postdoc. So, John, you've had a number of roles in your life. You've been a faculty member. You've been a chairman of a department for a long time.
Yeah, 17 years.
17 years. And then you were a dean.
I was a dean for 7 years, 7 weeks, and 7 days. And then the president of that university was Hahnemann, or I gather it was being called something else at the time. The president and the dean didn't see eye to eye, and I served. Every dean serves at the pleasure of the president. So I unserved myself and went back to being a professor.
Mm-hmm.
And officially, I gave up my tenure in 1998 at the time, a little after I left the editorship of the Anatomical Record. And that was probably the stupidest thing to do, but I thought I was doing the right thing by unblocking for the younger people the opportunity that space would provide. As a result of that, though, I was able to continue my teaching appointment, and they made me an emeritus professor. So I'm an adjunct emeritus professor at Drexel, and then I have an adjunct professorship, or instructorship, I guess, at the University of Pennsylvania. And it's at Pennsylvania that I teach gross anatomy in the laboratory with the students, and it's at Drexel that I teach microscopic anatomy. Mm-hmm. So that just clarifies the point that you raised. Yeah.
Thank you. Would you talk a little bit about each of those three roles, because most people don't have the opportunity to serve academics in those three areas. So what did you like about each of those roles? What didn't you like about each of those roles?
Well, there are parts of being a chairman that are terrific. You know, you're the boss, and you can do as you want. And you want to quit there?
No, please continue.
Okay. You can do what you want, but you really can't do what you want. You have to find out what it is that is going on in your group. And at Albuquerque, we were a very small department. We started with 24 students, and we were a 2-year school. Within 18 months of the origin of the school, it became a 4-year school, and we enlarged the department to 5 faculty.
So you joined just at the time they were starting the medical school?
Yes.
Okay, so you're one of the founding fathers of
That's correct.
UNM.
Yeah. I was giving a paper in Denver in the spring of 1964, when in the audience was Dr. Sidney Solomon, who was there hunting out a potential chairman for the anatomy department of this new school, which is due to open in August. So we have, a 5-month lead time, 4 months? And he heard my paper, which was on the human liver, and we had gotten some biopsy pieces in the OR, and happened to do some very elegant-looking microscopy on that. And he was impressed with the Ito cells that were being demonstrated there. And so he and I met after the paper, and he said, "Why don't you come to Albuquerque and see what we got?" And we did that. They made me an offer, cleared it with headquarters, my spouse at the time, and she would say, "Let's go, gung-ho." And we were in Memphis, and that's pretty short notice. I had made arrangements to spend 6 weeks at Yale in that summer, working with Russ Barnett, who had left Harvard and gone to Yale, and to do some histochemistry at the EM level on the retina of the rat. And we were lucky to do that. We never finished it, unfortunately. But from there, we went to Albuquerque, and we never went back to Memphis. And that was a problem. It was a problem for the people there, because I didn't give them very much lead time. But it was also a problem for us. I had scouted out Albuquerque on a visit, and we had found a place to live for the family. We did at the time have 2 dogs, 2 poodles, and we had to take care of them. And then we had, because of that, we did sell our house in Memphis. We had to put the stuff in storage for the summer, and then we had to get it unstored and then
shipped out.
In addition, when I got there, I had to find myself a gross anatomist I was a microscopic anatomist, and I can do gross anatomy, but I can't really do it at the level that I wanted to get it done. So I called up my friend in Pittsburgh, who I had known for many years, 12 years at least at that time, Len Napolitano. Said, how would you like to take a trip out to the West and see how things are in New Mexico? And he came, looked, and we made him an offer, and he came with his wife and 2 kids at the time. And as a result of going to Albuquerque, he produced another child, I guess, en route. But having done that, we had to find a place for gross anatomy. We had 24 students who were going to come in on the 1st of August, and they had started to collect cadavers and to get the anatomical regulations for the state in order so that we could work on them. And within 1 week of the time that we started, the last cadaver was obtained. So we had 4 cadavers.
Wow.
And we took the garage from the Exeter Tonella Funeral Home that was part of our school. We turned that into a lecture hall and some offices, as well as the gross anatomy lab was made out of the garage. It was double garage. Put in 4 tables. There were 6 students to a table. We had 4 cadavers. And we were ready to get into business on the 1st of August.
It's amazing. 65. So what was the lure to come to Albuquerque at that time? What really made you make that leap?
Well, it's interesting. It's because, well, I was ambitious. I wanted to be a chairman. It's a step up. There was a little salary involved. I think all of, what was it, $12,500, which was real money in those days.
Yeah.
We liked, my spouse at the time liked the desert, and I grew to like the desert very much also. And it was an opportunity, and it was over the rough part in the beginning until we got a building and other things. But that came because the people were active, and they were growers, they were planners, they were doers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the lure was in part the ability to build something new, create something good.
And it's going gangbusters, apparently, right now.
I was actually there last year for a meeting, and it is.
Yeah.
You'd hardly recognize the place. So many new buildings.
Well, I have a daughter and 2 grandchildren that live on the back of Sandia Mountain.
Oh, still? Okay.
Sandia Park, yeah. I did see her. I was out there 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
She came east last year. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Let's talk a little bit about your research training and your research program. What was the major focus of your work?
Oh, the major focus of my work, I guess, stems from the fact that I am a classic person with ADD. And I don't stick on one thing too long, although I do have patience to stay with it if I see the end, the light at the end of the tunnel. And I get along with people, I think, pretty well. And I like to collaborate with a lot of different people, and I have in the past. The interest stemmed from my work with Meredith Runner. We started in the mouse factory and had to work with pregnant mice. And the reason for that is we were testing chorionic gonadotrophin in those days. We didn't have a simple test for it. You would inject it into prenatal female mice, and if they produced hemorrhagic ovaries or ovulated them, then you had a positive chorionic gonadotrophin in the urine that was being tested. So I got into this reproductive endocrinology, if you will. My doctoral thesis was based on the endocrine glands of the mouse in pregnancy. And it started with a big beginning and all the way through to the end. And we got several publications out of that and really focused on a lot of other things. So I had a broad scope on different tissues. as well as different techniques that were done histologically. So that when histochemistry came along, that was just a natural extension
It would be,
of
yes.
the histological technique that I had was working with and continued to work with. And electron microscopy, of course, was the promotion of that into another stage of finer effort and better fixation and better handling of the tissue. I guess the classic works that we worked on retinas, we worked on lungs, and we were very successful with lung. We worked on liver. We did a lot with a little bit more on testis. Did a nice study with Bill Young from Kansas on ductile efferentes, a very, very simple experiment that was done on half a dozen guinea pigs, and beautiful end result, and with good EM pictures. And I teamed up with a pulmonologist from San Francisco, and the work that was done with him, Ted Finley, was the ones of lavaging lungs, to take out the alveolar macrophages of lungs of smokers and of non-smokers, as well as work that we hadn't published, smokers of marijuana, which Ted Finley, was able to sequester, if you will, from his contacts in San Francisco, where he eventually left Albuquerque and went back to San Francisco. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he was one hell of a good physician and knew how. He was a biochemist by training, and it was really a delight to work with him.
Mm-hmm. Well, your research program is pretty eclectic. Not many people work on many and multiple organ systems.
Well, I think that helped me in terms of being an editor.
Well, I was just going to go there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Very much so.
Because this is how AR was organized along organ system for
Yeah.
many, many years. And actually is, again, it's gone back to that format.
Well, that's good. Vindicated, I guess.
Vindicated. That's great. So, John, to me, you've always been a major influence in my life as a mentor. You caught me at a young age. I was young and naive, perhaps. No perhaps, definitely. And I'm curious about who were your mentors? Who really influenced your life in your many different roles?
I think Meredith Runner was the first. He had the patience of Job, I guess. A very, very patient man. And he would be willing to try something if it was in the ballpark. I guess another one who really wasn't a mentor was a collaborator, a crazy fellow, Russ Barnett. He had occasionally had a foulness to his speech, which was very crude not by conventional standards that you hear now on some of the channel TVs, but he was very inventive and very bright, even though sometimes you wish you could hit him over the head with a club. George Wislocky was a person of the old school. He had a very interesting background. His middle name is Bernays, and his mother's name, unmarried name, was Bernays. And Bernays, of course, his mother had a sister, and his sister married Sigmund Freud. And of course, this was interesting because when George Wislocky got married, he married a psychiatrist. Very interesting man, and he probably had ADD also, because he had a desk that was loaded with slides. But when you asked him for something, bingo, he could pick it right out and really get right with it. he was a grandmaster. And of course, Don Fawcett in that department, he would show you not only by example, but by a scholarship. Seemed introverted at many times, but he really was a scholar in the true name of the word, and his work demonstrated that. And you could your whole being gets raised by being able to partake of the kind of environment that he created for you. I was very thrilled with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who said it, but maybe I repeated it. You hire good people, you tell them what you want them to do and to get done, and then you leave them alone and let them make you look good.
Yes.
And that still works. And the big question is, you got to really make sure that you hire the good people.
Yes.
And you have to be able to recognize talent. Sometimes the talent is covered up with layers of other things. And if you can peel those away and you can see it, go after it.
Mm-hmm. Sound advice.
Yeah, yeah. Being a chairman was, getting back to that question, you could be your own boss, but you had to really take advantage of the fact that there were other brains in the department.
Mm-hmm.
We had 5 and ours to start with, and it got to be 7 or 8. I don't know what it is at the moment. So I think the size of the class at Albuquerque is about 73 now, if I'm not mistaken, but it was close to that. And I don't know if the department doesn't exist as a
Department was reorganized
Yeah.
and split and joined in different ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the actual size
Yeah.
is anymore.
Well, I think this is happening all over the country.
Yes.
And probably all over the world to a lesser extent. I think the frontier is in those countries with the most people. And I'm happy to see that the AR is expanding its editorial considerations to China, India,
Yes.
Japan, and I think that's terrific. It's well intended. They ought to make sure that they mine that area well, because that's where the talent is, and it ought to be brought into the mainstream.
Yes. Very true. You'll have a chance to attend the board meeting, I believe, tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
And that will get you caught up on the current thinking about the journal and where it's
Right.
going. But you're right, a major initiative for all of AAA journals is to move into Asia and take advantage of where the growth is coming from and where the new talent is.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things I was extremely impressed with you about was the way you incorporated people into what you were doing.
Oh, that.
So when I came as a postdoc, I thought this was a compliment at the time. You invited me to faculty meetings. I've been
I
doing
was there to pick your brain.
I've been to enough faculty meetings now. I'm not so sure anymore. But I was very impressed at the time that you did that, and we had weekly luncheons together. You really made me part of the team, and I very much appreciate that. But you also did that as editor-in-chief. When you brought editors on board, you really mentored them and taught them how to edit. So I'm an editor of another journal, a development journal, as you know, Developmental
Yes.
Dynamics.
It's a fine,
And-
fine journal.
Thank you. And I learned how to do that from you.
Oh, no.
You're my primary mentor for
Well,
that task.
I belong to a society, I don't think it's still active. It was called God, I'm blocking now.
There's a Council of Biological Editors.
Council of Biological
It
Editors.
is still very active, actually. I'm
Yeah.
a member as well.
Good. Because I was one of the earlier members of it,
Mhm.
and I actually had a meeting of them out in Albuquerque back in sometime in the 70s. I can't remember the precise date. And that was a very successful meeting. We had lunch up in the top of the Sandia Mountains.
Mhm.
And I don't think anybody had air sickness. The last time I was up there, I had air sickness.
It's quite an altitude change.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially when you're at sea level to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but that's what taught me a little bit, and that comes as another point I want to mention to a group who may be looking at this tape, is don't be afraid to take a risk. It was taking a risk to go to Albuquerque because there wasn't anything there, to start something from scratch. It was taking a risk, if you will, for the Council of Biology editors to come to Albuquerque. This fellow had only been a member of the society for 2 years. They didn't know too much about me, and I didn't know much about them, but I know more about them than vice versa. And they were willing to hold a meeting in this town, and we had a very successful meeting, and was very, very well received, and I remembered it well. And when you have the opportunity, and it may be a risk, take it and see what you can make out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll come back to you in spades, perhaps. Certainly it would be well worth the effort.
When you became editor-in-chief, were you on the editorial board prior to becoming editor of AR?
Yeah, for 2 years.
And who was the editor at that time? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, Charlie Goss.
Oh, Charlie. Okay, yeah. And was he a mentor as an editor?
No, Charlie, he really didn't do much with the associate editors. I think it was part of the old school where the master would do most of it, and then he would farm it out if he didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. He was a very learned man, and I think he translated a lot of stuff from the original Greek. He was a master of the Greek language. I just feel so insignificant to some of the talent that really preceded from the old masters who were associated with our science.
Certainly have been some great editors of AR.
Yeah.
No question.
Well, Alan Boyden.
Boyden, yes.
He had 20 years from 28 to 48, and Goss had 20 years from 48 to 68, and I had 30 years from 68 to 98. And then Mark Wald had it for 10 years.
And Curtis starting his second 5-year term. So
right.
a lot of longevity there.
Yeah.
So you probably don't realize it, but you did some very unique things as editors for the editorial board. So in those days, everything, of course, was done by mail.
Oh, God, yes.
And we would get a manuscript to review. It always came with another envelope addressed back to you, stamped. So all we had to do was write our review, put it in the envelope, and send it right back. We didn't have to spend our time addressing the envelope or pay for the stamps, which in those days took a part of your budget. But another thing you did that really helped me a lot, and it was very unique for the time. I was reviewing for many other journals, and nobody else did this. After the process was over, you wrote a very detailed letter to the editor on how to focus on the revision. You didn't just say, here are the reviews, figure it out yourself. You gave guidance, but very importantly, you sent those reviews to the 2 reviewers. So they knew what their colleague... Well, yeah, they knew what their peers thought, and you could gauge your mark.
Yeah.
Especially for a young editor, that made a huge difference. And I do remember calling you a couple of times saying, John, I missed the mark on this. This other guy is right. He saw something I didn't see.
Right.
But that really helped me a lot in how I reviewed manuscripts and put it in perspective, and how you dealt with nasty comments and turned those around to what was the central issue the author needed to deal with, and to remove it from the personal attack that sometimes comes out of a review. Yeah. That was very much appreciated. I thought it was a unique style.
Yeah. One of the things I felt for an author, if an author gets some negative reviews, and try to balance that, you don't need to be personal. But if the science is there and you just differ with interpretation, I feel, and I have done this as the editor, I let the paper pass even though it had negative reviews. And with the argument that I think that the author is entitled to get the paper published. If it is really as bad as the reviewers say, it's not going to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. The journal may suffer for that issue because of the negativity of that particular work, but the author's entitled to get the message out as he or she sees it. Mm-hmm. And I ought not to interfere with that opportunity for the author. And I've used that excuse, if you will, on several occasions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I've suffered for that. Why did you publish that paper? Yeah.
There isn't an editor who hasn't heard that one. and the converse, why the hell didn't you publish my paper? we get both sides of that.
Yeah.
But that also, I published a number of my early papers in Anatomical Record under you as editor. And I always felt the reviews were extremely rigorous, but also very helpful.
Good. Yeah.
And you always put the reviews in perspective, which again helped mentor me on how to write a better paper and how to respond to the reviewers. I remember one that I think had to go through 3 or 4 different revisions, a very stubborn reviewer, and you kept bringing me back to the point, and you kept bringing the reviewer back to the point, and finally we got it right and got it through. So you mentored me along as an author as well as an editor.
I had forgotten all of that. Yeah. It seems to blur a little bit.
Well, you've 29, 30 years, whatever it was, how many papers?
No,
that's a lot of papers.
There's still a lot of work to be done. There's one that I have in my briefcase that I want to present to the editorial board through Kurt, and one I wanted to give to you as the editor of Dynamics, because I think it has the opportunity of being a prototype of something that can be done that would maybe take a giant step forward for both journals. Yeah.
Oh, I look forward to talking with you about that. Right. That'd be great. Right. So, not everyone knows, but when you stepped down as editor-in-chief in 1998 of Anatomical Record, Wiley created a new award for the American Association of Anatomists called the Aaron J. Ladman Exemplary, I never could say that word, Service Award.
It's hard.
It's a hard one. It should have been extraordinary. That would have been a little bit easier. And it is because you had and still have extraordinary service to the community. What's the driver there for you? Why do you do so much service? Why did you do so much service? Why do you continue now to teach?
Well, I like to teach. I get paid for teaching.
That's a driver.
And that's a driver. New Mexico is a poor state. It's in the lower 20% of the states of the United States. Its pay structure is in that bracket also. Mm-hmm. And so when you come to New Mexico, unless it's radically changed, which I don't think it has, you do for other purposes, the climate, the camaraderie, culture, all of the above. And as a result, there isn't much in the exchequer when you leave New Mexico that you have to rely on. So I teach because I like to do it, but I get paid for it. And the pay is not substantial, but it pays part of the freight. And with the blessings of good life I have, which I attribute to the fact that I continue to have 2 dogs, which need to be walked 4 times a day, and that keeps you active.
Poodle still?
1 poodle, and then we have a rescue dog who's half golden retriever as well as yellow lab, who probably is now a year and a half and will be a puppy for the next 4 years until we can break him of it.
And which one is called anatomical and which one record?
No, the first one, the female, the poodle, is 6, and she was my birthday present for my 80th birthday.
Mm.
And so she's going on 6, and she's Abigail. My first poodle was Abigail, and we had her back in 1955. Yeah, so a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've had dogs pretty much continuously.
Almost, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping for a new dog someday. If my wife is listening, or a friend of my wife's, please pass that on.
What breed do you want?
I don't care. I just love dogs. It really doesn't matter.
Oh, my.
They're just wonderful companions.
Absolutely, yes.
But grandkids aren't so bad either.
That's right.
They work quite well,
particularly when the parents diaper them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's maybe a little unfair to ask this question to you today because the board meeting is tomorrow. But I'm just curious. Publishing has changed a lot, obviously,
I know that.
Since 1998 when you stepped down as AR. And I remember going to all the board meetings. They were always held at the American Association of Anatomists meetings when I was on the board. And every board meeting you brought something to the others. Here's something different. Here's the trend. We need to respond to this. You're always driving change in the journal. What do you see about publishing now that you think is better than it was then, or what do you think isn't as good?
Well, one of the things I have not done as yet is to go online and see the papers that they say that they published online.
Mm-hmm, the quality of the papers.
Not only quality, but just to see them and to work with the online. Maybe I'm a throwback to the dinosaurs in terms of being able to climb on to the new technology of the digitalized image. But I think it's a tremendous advance. The photography is terrific. Some of the journals that I see in print, though, with postage-sized stamps of pictures that are either completely black or completely red, I look at the picture and I try to find from the legend what are they talking about. And I find this is very difficult.
Yes.
Very difficult.
Yeah, there is a tendency to reproduce things very small.
And I can understand that. There still is a problem with cost and color.
Yes.
But the technique is there for purposes of teaching that should not be sacrificed. I mean, for what is being alluded to in the photograph. And of course, you can do anything you want to with a picture now, including cheat.
Yeah, it has become a problem, and editors are checking much more carefully for data manipulation. You could always do data manipulation, of course, but it's just much easier to do it now.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you deal with that?
Well, there's even at this board meeting, we've been talking about more checks. So there's electronic programs. There are programs that look at electronic images and can look at whether changes have been made to individual pixels versus all the pixels across.
Oh, my.
So things of that nature, and more journals are using this. But I still think the best way to handle this is education. Tell authors why this is not appropriate, and get them on your team, so you don't have to be at that level of prevention of crime. You do way ahead.
That's right.
Yeah. So I jokingly say you're retired. I can't believe you're the kind of guy who'll ever retire in your teaching.
No. But I do other things.
Well, I know you do, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So what else do you do besides teach at this point in your life?
My wife is the boss lady of Goddard School, which is a preschool It started in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and then now about 390 of these franchises around the country, the United States. And it's a high-quality preschool. And I do the bookkeeping on this, and I'm also the gopher, since we have to give the kids, and it's from 6 weeks of age till 5 years, and it goes up to pre-kindergarten. We managed to, they call me Mr. John when I come in there. And
not Dr. John.
Oh, no, just Mr. John, that's fine. And we have a good time. Fortunately, the business has been good. The setback in the economic life that occurred in the last 2.5, 3 years has hit us a little bit, so we're down 15-20% perhaps. But we're able to
Keep going.
Keep going, yeah.
Well, that's good.
So with that and teaching and with the dogs and those responsibilities, we still have time to take a vacation on occasion. And life is good.
Well, that's wonderful, John.
And I feel good about it.
Fantastic. I'm very happy. Are there other things you'd like to talk about before we close today?
Oh.
Any parts of your career we haven't focused enough on?
Parts of my career. About Dean.
About Dean. I thought that might be a subject you'd want to avoid.
A dean, basically, in the climate that we're in now, unless I've been terribly misled, is one that you've got to go out and be able to get money.
Yes.
Because deaning is one of having a vision of where you want to go with your faculty, but you've got to be able to come up with the money to get you there.
Yes.
And unless you have a good vision and a good ability to generate the funds, whether it be from individuals or governments or other agencies, you don't want to be a dean. The 4 or 5 ceremonial performances that you make each year with a group is anybody can do that. You get dressed up in your cap and gown. When I was in grade school, they said that there are 3 things that you should do as a speaker. It's stand up to be seen, speak up to be heard, and shut up to be appreciated. And maybe that's what a dean ought to do. Instead of the latter part, would say just sit down to be appreciated. But it really frightens people when you use those terms.
It's funny. Very good, John. I'd like to close by saying that John will be honored at this year's experimental biology meeting in 2 ways. First, as a fellow of the American Association of Anatomists.
Thank you, sir.
But also for his long-term membership and service to the society. I think you've been a member close to 60 years. Do you remember what year you joined? You probably don't.
I think it was either
not many people
53 or 4, I'm not certain.
53 or 4. Do you remember who nominated you?
I was at Harvard at the time, so it must have been one of those...
one of the Harvard people? Yeah.
No,
so, definitely a long time.
Yeah.
57-ish or so.
Yeah, close to 60. Yeah.
Close to 60.
And the years have gone fast. They've gone very fast.
Words of wisdom you want to leave us with?
Yeah. Don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. I've been a great procrastinator in my life, which is one of the cardinal problems that you have with ADD. And I try, believe it or not to procrastinate. But even this year, I have to get an extension for my income tax because I haven't done my homework. But other things got done, and we'll get this one done.
Better hurry up and send it in. The government needs everything they can get.
Well, they gave me 3 extra days this year.
3 extra days. So that's fair. John, it's really been great talking
So
with you today.
likewise.
It really has been
Thank you.
fantastic. You have really all of our best wishes for
Thank
every
you.
success and happiness in the future.